Okay, hey, what's up? So, I'm back again doing the second part of um, Mark 4, the analysis that I had been working on. And last video we got through verses 1 to 14. Again, this whole first part, or first half, I guess, of the analysis will be towards breaking down the language and the words that are used and looking at it more from the sort of right brain, emotional, sort of meaningful aspect to it all. So we're going to be looking into like uh, mainly the words, and then hopefully, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to film for as long as I feel is necessary. So we may not get all the way through the rest of the verses. We may only do a part, but we'll just go with the flow. Um, I've been, doing some stuff here lately with other things, personal things, making some changes in my life and stuff like that. So, um, I've not been um, working, exclusively on this for the past few days or however long it's been. But yeah, without any further ado, I don't think I have anything else to say. We'll just go ahead and get straight into it. So we left off with Mark 4:13 and 4:14. We'll go ahead and read those because, you know, they were just, really important. And he said unto them, or 4:13, and he said unto them, Know ye not this parable? And how then will ye know all parables? 4:14, the sower soweth the word. So basically, what this is telling us, like I said last time, I'm going to try not to be, repeat myself too much. But this, Jesus here is giving us the key to being able to understand all wisdom, all symbolism, uh, basically giving us the key to unlock the meaning to any sort of words. Because it's ultimately about the great word, which is, God's word, which is, pure vibrational frequency, which is giving rise and maintenance, in a sense, to all things that are existing, as well as being able to take away those things that are dying and then basically recycle them back into creation um, through the process of purification, of course. But yeah, so, but these very principles that are, like, with the sine wave and the zodiac and the Kabbalah and all those principles and those properties are embedded within our languages, including, and if I'm not mistaken, especially English. This is what makes English so prominent and so powerful, is because it is the most. It's basically the alphabet. It's really the alphabet that is the most perfected um, Kabbalistic language there is, or alphabet that there is. So we'll just go ahead and keep moving on. So it says, and so he's basically explaining the parable, He says, and these are they by the wayside, where the word is sown. But when they have heard, Satan cometh immediately and taketh away the word that was sown in their hearts. All right? So basically what he's telling us here is that the seeds are being sown on the wayside. Notice that, it says, and these are they by the wayside, right? Where the word is sown, right? So when he's saying by the wayside, so you have this, the Trinity, right? You have the two dualities of, everything, right? The two primary genders of every duality, every alchemical marriage. And then you have that third, which brings them up together and bridges the gap and reunifies them, right? So this is the way, right? You want to be in the center, right? You want to be in alignment with Christ. That's what it's all about, right? Is getting into the center, right? these are they by the wayside, right? They're back in materiality, right? They're caught in the dualities, right? Of seeming separation and conflict in that sense, right? But that's where the word is being sown, right? And these are they by the wayside where the word is sown, right? So, the sower is going and speaking these words to those who are in that sort of auxiliary, external, outside nature, right? Because obviously, if you're in the way, right, if you're walking in that center, it's you're one with the sower, right? But the sower is casting the seeds to the people who are on the wayside, right? And then it says, but when they have heard, Satan cometh immediately and taketh away the word that was sown in their hearts, right? So, the word of Christ is meant to get inside the center, right? So as it's making its way into the center, Satan comes along and immediately taketh away the word that was sown in their hearts. So who Satan is, right? And by the way, Satan and Lucifer are not the same being, okay? Lucifer is Latin for Venus, right? So Venus is a specific wandering star, and Satan is an alteration of the name Saturn, who is Kronos, right? And that's a different wandering star. So just keep that in mind, right? And anytime they talk about the devil in the Bible, they're talking about Saturn, right? Because Saturn, again, represents death and time, temporality, the external aspects. So like I've mentioned before with Proverbs 25:11, a word fitly spoken is like apples of gold in pictures of silver, right? And remember how you have 13 moons, right? So you have the first 6 moons, and then you have the 7 in the center, and then you have the last 6 moons, right? Which is the 8 to 13. These 6 and these 6 are the disciples, right? These 6 and these 6 are the 12 zodiacal signs. These 6 and these 6 are the 12 Sephiroth, right? But it's this one here in the center, which is not only the key, right? Because the key goes into the center of the lock, but it is also the source, right? So a word fitly spoken, right? Going back to Proverbs 25:11, a word fitly spoken, right? So you have the spokes on a wheel, right? Again, spoken, a word fitly, right? Spoke, right? Spoken, that's why it's called, that's why they say spoke on a wheel, and spoke as in past tense of speak, is like apples of gold, right? So the one in the center is the apple of gold in pictures of silver. So the picture of silver, right, is the ox, right? It's the auxiliary, the ox, right? That is the external, right? The external, the auxiliary, right? It is the toroidal field. Because again, remember, the ox is also representative of the bull, right? And that's the toroidal field, the torus, right? It is the external body of the field, whereas this is the dielectric center, right? So Satan, right, represents the external aspect, which is the duality, right? Satan, time and materiality, comes and takes away the word that was sown in their heart, right? He's taking them out of the center, right? And if you notice, they give us these fake space pictures of, Saturn and this and that. There's a hexagon on the pole or poles of Saturn, right? Again, that hexagon is referring to the externalized part of the cube, right? Because when you talk about the toroidal field or the magnetic field with the dielectric center, that is one with the cube, right? And the dielectric center is the center of the cube, right? Like they say in Revelation, And I saw no temple therein, for the Lord God and the Lamb are the temple of it. I saw no temple therein. Just like how we can see the magnetic field under the ferrocell, but we still cannot see the dielectric, which is the pataphysical. It's the pataphysical, the Father. It's farther away. You cannot see it. That's why God, whom no man hath seen at any time, right? Because this is time, right? The Son, right, traverses the 12 zodiacal signs and gives us these dualities, summer and winter, day and night. But the oneness transcends all that. It has no separation. It has no duality because it contains both, right? And because it contains both, ultimately within its core, remember how they say that in the city of God, or, within the city of God, there is no need of the light of the sun or the moon, for the glory of the Lord is the light of it, right? There is no sun and moon. There is no day and night. There is no summer and winter in the center. And that's where you want to get, because it's in that center where we build our house upon the rock, right? So you see what they're saying here in 4:15? All right, let's move on. So 4:16 says, and these are they likewise, which are sown on stony ground, who, when they have heard the word, immediately receive it with gladness. Okay? Immediately receive it with gladness. They recognize the wisdom or the energy of the sower, right? But their ego will not let it completely in, right? It's received on stony ground, right? So it's rigid, again, like the previous verse of, let me see, where he was saying the parable. Yeah, in 4:5 and 4:6. So, yeah, these are they which receive it on stony ground. In other words, their heart has become hardened. It can't get in, right? In other words, this goes a lot back to the whole thing of, seeing the face of Medusa turns men into stone, this and that, right? In other words, it petrifies them and basically makes them dead. Now, keep in mind, there is a purpose for the rock, right? But you want to be a lively stone, right? You don't want to be a dead stone, okay? So there is a purpose of the firmness of the stone, right? Building your house upon that rock. But at the same time, you don't want to harden your heart so much to the point where the seed can't get in. You see what I'm saying? There's a lot of symbolism actually that that refers to various forms of fire that has become hardened and turned to stone or turned into the ash, right? Because it's like the symbolism of the phoenix. When the phoenix burns up and it turns into ash, that is a symbol of death, just like the ash tree, right? The ash trees will, if I can't remember exactly, but the leaves of the ash tree will turn red, right? Symbolically telling us about burning trees, because when the trees burn up, they turn into ash, and then now they are of the dust, right? They are of the dirt again, and that's how Adam was formed, was from the dust of the ground, right? Again, this is going back to materiality. That's what all of this is about, right? So you understand that you will always have this physical vessel, right? So long as you're down here in this life. But you want to be in alignment with that which transcends the physical. Do you see what I'm saying? Hence the philosopher's stone, or the symbolic stone, right? The crystal, the Christ L, right? Which allows the light to penetrate it, right? Which reflects the light and refracts it as well, right? Which it's clear and you can see through it, the crystal, right? But either way, right? The stone, the ashlar stone, right? The city of God, who is like transparent gold, clear as crystal, right, represents the external part of it. And all that's really telling you is just, it's talking about the external part of creation, right? Which is, yes, a part of creation, but what they're trying to get you back to is that transcendent part, right? The part that allows you to understand the eternality of our existence and to hold on to anything down here in the physical. It's just like when Jesus is talking about, see all these buildings, there shall not be left one stone upon another that shall not be cast down. Right? So they immediately receive it with gladness because they understand. A part of them understands the wisdom or the energy around that truth. But again, their heart is hardened and it can't get fully in to take root. Right? 4:17, and have no root in themselves, and so endure but for a time. Afterward, when affliction or persecution ariseth for the word's sake, immediately they are offended. Okay, there's a lot in this one, 4:17. And have no root in themselves. Again, because the seed couldn't take root, it doesn't, start to sprout those roots in order to hold itself into the center of you, right? So the thing about all of these various different things about the Holy Bible that we've been overlooking for so long, we used to have the truth. We used to understand this, right? Marty Leeds points out in 100 different ways how the way we used to be back then, when we were more in alignment with the truth and we were more in alignment with Christ, but we've lost our way, right? We want to ground ourselves in faith, right? And faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. The substance, it is the stance beneath the surface, right? And is the evidence of things you cannot see, the dielectric, okay? So that's the purpose of all of the symbolism, the phonetics, these various different keys hidden in the language, and the mathematics, the geometry, the astrology. That's what all of this is there for, to help you to understand the logic of the logos. Therefore, no matter what happens out here in this world, your faith will never be shaken. And have no root in themselves, okay? So you want to have this knowledge of this cube thing within you, right? Because having that knowledge and that logic within you, it strengthens your faith. It roots you into it, right? And the root chakra is the red chakra, which is this external cube, okay? And so therefore, it's like you want to have that knowledge in yourself, right? You want to have the root chakra, the awareness of that root chakra, that cube that's always around you, that external cube, and the inner invisible holographic cube within. Well, they're both holographic, but the dielectric central cube of the tesseract, right? If you've not seen the painting Corpus Hypercubus by Salvador Dali, you should go check that out. Maybe one of these days I'll look up one of his paintings and kind of talk about it and break down some various stuff, because they're actually really interesting. Salvador Dali knew what he was painting. And so endure, but for a time, endure. They go into the door. Remember, Jesus is the door. Endure, right? They endure, but for a time. They only go into this for this, right? They only endure. They only go in the door, but for a time. So they're only understanding the truth, and they're only seeking that salvation, right? For material, external things, right? But for a time. You see? Afterward, right? When affliction or persecution ariseth for the word's sake, immediately they are offended, right? So, excuse me, been having this cough, but it says, one of these days I'm going to be coughing so much I'm going to end up in the coffin, but it's only because I drink so much coffee. Excuse me. Yeah, so going endure, but for a time, right? And the door, a door, right, is often used symbolically alongside a face. You'll notice that in a lot of fiction, they'll put a face on a door, right? And the door will like talk and stuff like that. Again, because the door, right, which, if a, knock and the door shall be opened, etc., is talking about the face of the cube. And when you open it up, then you go into the center, right? So that's why doors and faces are often paralleled with each other, right? So that's another thing. Afterward, when persecution ariseth for the word's sake, immediately they are offended, right? Afterward, right? So, aft, right? An aft is a rear part of the ship, right? Again, we go back to the ship being the vessel, right? The sacred temple not built with human hands, right? That the aft, afterward, right? The aft is the rear part of the ship, but it's also used to describe a person's bottom. So the rear part, the bottom of a human body, these are referring to the lower chakras, right? Again, materiality, right? And the ward is a very interesting word as well. Not only because it's close to the word, and remember, all vowels are interchangeable with each other to act as parallels to other words, right? But the ward is not only like a room or a section of a building, it's also a defensive barrier, right? And it's also referring to a guardian, someone who's protecting you, right? So the ward is symbolically talking about this this building, right? The section of a building, right, which acts as a barrier. So again, that's what the ward is, right? Symbolically, right? It is that which it's the external part of your field, the cube, again, right? So afterward is telling you again about the lower, more external aspects of the field, right? Afterward. Immediately they are offended. Okay, so this is key here. So if you think about the word offend, it's telling you off end. Remember, the Father is telling us about the farther, right? So you want to take that journey into the center, right? That's what the letter A is telling us, right? It's about the alpha, right? It's about the ox's head, right? And again, it's the head which is the journey that we take to go directly down back into the center. So we start in the lower nature, we make our way up to the top, and then we journey back down into the center, and that's where we meet the oneness, right? So off end, they're being pushed off the end of something. Shout out to Rob Ager for pointing out this interesting little bit about this word offend. But they're being pushed off the center altar or the inner pinnacle, right? So when you think of the word of the Corinthians, the Corinth is again talking about the holy mountain, right? Ephesus is telling us about the overseer, hence the eye of God looking down below, right? It's at the pinnacle. God is the master, and the mast is that central pole in a ship, going back to the vessel, which has the triangular shaped sails, or not, they're not always triangular, but it's the pinnacle high point in the center of the ship, right? The master, right? And they're being pushed off the end of that. They're off-ended, right? They're making their way up to the top, which is the end, the farther part away, which is the Father. They're making their way almost to the end, and they're pushed off of it. And then guess what? They go back without, right? They go back outside of the center, right? Immediately, they are off-ended, right? Each one of these words, right? Endure, but for a time, right? So they're going in the door just for these external parts, right? Again, the door is talking about the faces, right? So they're going into the door, right? Afterward, when persecution or afterward, when affliction or persecution ariseth for the word's sake, immediately they are offended, right? So they're also telling us here that affliction and persecution ariseth for the word's sake, right? And it is through these these aspects of our lives, right, when these things happen, that gives you the opportunity to cleanse yourself. It is through these types of experiences that allow you to cleanse the soul, right? Because obviously, running after pleasure and material comforts is not going to improve the state of your soul, right? It's going to be letting go of those things and giving back to others. That's going to, and in this world, to do that, you have to suffer affliction and persecution, right? Again, immediately they are off-ended, right? So each one of these words in this verse, 417, is telling you all about this process of trying to get to the center, but keep getting pushed back out. And it's all about understanding the word. But I also want to point this out to you as well. So this is 417, right? 417, right? So the 4 is telling us about this, the cross, right? Remember, and the cross is telling us about the 4 seasons, right? So keep in mind what these are, right? These are 6 months, and these are 6 months, right? Again, the 7, right, is talking about the one in the center, right? Now, what's interesting is that the 7th prime is 17, right? And so if you lay out the numbers from 1 to 17, right, you have the first 8 digits here, and then you have 9 in the center, and then you have 10 to 17, right? So when you look at the zodiacal belt on the analemma, right, it goes 8 degrees above the ecliptic, and 8 degrees below. So we have a total of 16 degrees here. And the sun is in the center on the line of perfection, counting as that 0 or that 17, if we apply the rule of Kalel, right? So the number 17 is also telling us about this process, about the sun in the center of that cross, just like this 7 here. So even down to the number, again, the chapter and verse numbers are telling us very specific things, okay? And you can also do something like this, right? I know I'm getting into the math a little bit, but you can also look at it like this. So 417, right? Let's take away 4 from 17. What are we left with? 13. Let's add 4 to 17. What do we have? 21. Again, 21. 20 is telling us about the external aspects of our field, right? The circle and the square, where our fingers and our toes are touching that perimeter. This is the most externalized part of our body, the extremities, right? Extremities, again, the X making the cross, right? Extremities, externalized, right? That's where our fingers and toes are touching, and we have 20 fingers and toes. So we have 20 around 1, going back to the rule of Kalel, which is the center point, right? So even if we subtract 4 from 17 or add 4 to 17, again, those same mathematics are bringing us straight back to the same process. So are you understanding what the key is here is to get to the center, right? And the way that we get to the center is by understanding the word, right? It's about understanding the word, consolidating them back into the oneness, right? Okay? Because it's only through completing those sorts of alchemical marriages can we get to that greater transcendent truth. Because again, strengthen the things which remain. You receive a seed, you grow it. You plant it in your heart, you grow it. You let that grow. Then you take the seed of that fruit that grew and you consume that and you keep going. You keep building upon that which you've already worked for, right? This is the whole process of Freemasonry, right? It's just unfortunate that people don't understand the truth of Freemasonry either, just like they don't understand the truth of Christianity, or they've lost that truth. So 4:18, and these are they which are sown among thorns, such as hear the word. Let's see if I have anything written for 4:18. No, I don't. So we're going to read 4:18 and 4:19 together. 4:18, and these are they which are sown among thorns. You remember what I was saying about thorns? You go back to the thorn rune, which is thorasaz, which means resistance and conflict. It's talking about the fact that down here, the rose may be beautiful and smell good, and maybe even have medicinal effects, but the thorns there are serve to remind us that down here, there's both good and bad, right? Every rose has its thorn, remember? Such as hear the word, 4:19, and the cares of this world, and the deceitfulness of riches, and the lusts of other things, entering in, choke the word, and it becometh unfruitful. So, again, the things that happen out here in the external part of our life, right? The things that we encounter in this world, right? These are the things which distract us and get in the way of understanding that ultimate transcendent truth, right? So, a lot of people have various different kinds of problems. Some people have problems with, their psychological state of their emotions, or, they may have relationship problems, or they may have problems with certain substances, or they may, be struggling financially. Either way, everybody's problems come down to the way that this world functions. And the way that this world functions is ultimately going to be flawed if the people who are directing the way that it functions are flawed, or if they're purposefully making it flawed. But it is that word, right? It is that transcendent truth which allows us to basically always remain after the external storm comes and goes, right? And we'll get into the storm, towards the end of this chapter. But and the cares of this world. This is a really interesting word. So cares, right? You have C, and then you have ARES, the cares of this world. The C goes back to the circle, goes back to the whatchamacallit, the waters, right? That's why it's called the sea, right? Compass, right? Makes that C shape as you turn it, right? So cares. Aries or Aries, right, is another name for Aries again. So we have this and the cares of this world, right? So we have this reference to waters and fire, right? Waters and fires. So again, that's the up and down process, right? You have the baptism of fire, the baptism of water. So he's kind of telling us through one singular word, and the cares of this world means the ups and downs of life. That we're ultimately going to be doomed at some point in our life to the ups and downs, right? So it's not really so much that we can't stop caring for the things about this world. It's just a part of life. The ups and downs are gonna happen, right? Because we have C, Eris, right? So you have the baptism of fire with the Eris, right? And then you have the baptism of water in the winter, right? And that's just a part of life, right? The cares of this world. We can't help it through the times of ignorance, like when we're young and stuff, when we care more about, say, like music or, art or even trivial things like movies or whatever. You know what I mean? It's like we can't help those kinds of things, especially if we don't know any better, right? So, but it says here, right? And the cares of this world and the deceitfulness of riches and the lusts of other things entering in choke the word. He's saying choke the word, right? These things choke the word. Why is he saying choke? Because again, to choke means to cut off the breath, right? To cut off the air from someone to where they cannot breathe. Again, the word spirit comes from spiritus, which means breath, and spirare, which means to breathe. So by choking, we're cutting off the spirit. So you see what he's saying? He's saying, listen to that spirit. Listen to that little voice in your head that you know is righteous. And we understand that through mediating and meditating the air that's passing through us, right? And I don't know all the etymology for this. This is just something that just came to mind. But Ken Wheeler on YouTube basically breaks down the etymology of the current way that we describe meditation and breath work and stuff, going back to like, I think it was like Greece and India and stuff, which ultimately has like the root meaning to burn. Again, through the process of meditation, we are to burn, right? What are we to burn? Ignorance, right? Because again, it's like thorns, right? It's like an unkempt garden, right? That's choking the light, right? So again, we want to go in and strengthen that light to burn away all the ignorance. And the best way to do that is to remember that the light within you is who you truly are. And that light is universal in all life, right? And so therefore we have a connection to other people. We're ultimately one with other people. And we shouldn't be having so many problems with other people. And we shouldn't be inflicting pain and anger onto other people because they're ultimately our brothers and sisters, okay? So don't choke the word. In other words, let the spirit flow. Get in tune with your breath and pray and speak with God, because it is through the breath that we understand that we are alive and that the life is flowing through us, okay? Again, and choke, and the lusts of other things entering and choke the word, and it becometh unfruitful. Unfruitful, meaning that it dies. It dies. Again, the Sephiroth, remember, those are called the fruit on the tree. I don't have it drawn here, but I had it here previously. But the Sephirah are the fruit on the tree of life. And the problem right now is that the Sephirah is missing 2 fruit in most people, which is rendering them into slaves. If they don't have their higher purple one, their helm of salvation, and they don't have their breastplate of righteousness, the middle green one, then they've basically been rendered into a slave, which is what the whole purpose of the fall of mankind is all about. Adam and Eve corrupted the tree by removing those 2 fruit, by listening to the deceitfulness of riches and lusts of other things, of the serpent, right? And they became unfruitful. They lost those 2 fruits. And when those 2 fruits are missing, it starts to decay the other ones. So again, as you go down this process of the alchemical, purification and the arising of the light and just the betterment of yourself, these things start to restore. They start to return. And when you get in touch with that, you'll understand what I'm talking about. And whenever you're there, you realize that there is a way for heaven and earth to reunite within your life, and for you to receive the life that you are always ultimately seeking throughout all lives, okay? And that is to get back into oneness with the light, which is Christ. And he's also the Word, right? Okay, so now we go on to 420. It says here, and these are they which are sown on good ground, such as hear the word and receive it, and bring forth fruit, some 30-fold, some 60, and some 100. So I'm not going to talk about the 30, 60, and 100 again, because we'll probably get into that with the whole mathematical stuff. Marty pretty much, sums up a lot of those kinds of things. But ultimately, it goes back to these same processes, Again, receive. Re means to do again, right? Or, to come back around, right? And sieve is related to sieve, right? The letters and the sound of the word are pretty much close to sieve, which is to filter. Sieve is also related to 7, because the 7 again goes back to the breath and the resonance, right? To that current living life within you that's like resonating, right? The sieve, it's the filter, right? And as you re-sieve the word, you refilter it through you, right? That's the whole process. You keep filtering the word through you, and not only does it cleanse you of all that crap, but it also starts to, grow and strengthen within you, right? That's what you want to do. In other words, you want to keep swallowing those seeds of the truth, right? And I was going to bring this up last time, but I had forgotten, but it's very key. So when you solar gaze, right, when you're looking at the sun, you'll notice that there'll be all these little circles that are coming off of it. And the little circles are like this. So they're like a circle, right? Well, actually, go ahead. So it's like a circle, and then inside is like another little circle, right? Now, these things are so small, and maybe my eyes aren't completely attuned to seeing this part of the frequency of light, but that's what they look like, right? And what I call them are little light pixels, right? The sun is like a generator of these things. And when you're looking at the sun, or even whenever you're just looking at sunlight slanting through a windowsill or like mini blinds or something, and you see the sunlight coming through, if you just squint, you'll see the light is made up of these little circles, right? And that's why I call them light pixels, because just like the little squares that make up pixels on all these screens, right? These are the true light pixels, which make up our whole reality. They're basically little tiny versions of the sun, and these are the seeds, right? These are the seeds that the sower is sowing, because again, the sower is Christ, who is the sun, and these little circles that are just pouring off of it, that's the seeds, that's the word of God, just like how I mentioned before, that it's the light, which is the word itself. Remember all those parallels that I was talking about, how the light and the word are ultimately one? They're just so they're almost indistinguishable, that they appear as the same thing, right? Which they ultimately are, right? But at times you can catch the different. Lightning and thunder is a good example of how you can distinguish the light from the sound, but ultimately they are one, right? But yes, so that's what when we're talking about, the seeds, it's not only the words that are going in that we're listening to, but it's also those little things that the light is made up of, right? That we are to consume, right? So that's why you should spend time being in the sun, looking at the sun, etc. Although I would say, if you've never looked at the sun before, what I recommend is just watching the sunset and the sunrise, and then maybe later on, if you feel comfortable, you can look at the sun at any point of the day. But let me see real quick. Yeah, it's separating the wheat from the chaff through the filter, which is, the filter is your breath, right? So now the chapter starts to change. 4:21, and he said unto them, is a candle brought to be put under a bushel or under a bed, and not to be set on a candlestick? This is really important here. Again, the candle, right? It's the symbol of the divine seed, right? The divine light, the spark. So when you look at a candle flame, right? Hang on. When you look at a candle flame, so, just like how you can solar gaze, you can also candle gaze. So the candle flame looks like this, right? And there's many things to gleam. I keep getting gleam and glean mixed up, but you get the idea. To extract from looking at the candle flame, right? What does he say? And his ministers are as a flame of fire, right? again, the ministers go back to the many stars, because the many stars are the little lights as well, which are also symbolic of the seeds, right? Yes, so the candle is a symbol of the divine seed, right? It's like a little miniature version of the sun, a flame, right? And this is also the Vesica Pisces, or the Ichthys fish in the Vesica Pisces, right? Again, going back to the Trinity, right? Because you have the two dualities, and then when they come together, it's that center fish shape, which is the flame, right? So yeah, it's talking about that divine spark, right? Because again, all sparks, right, have the 6-axis around them of the cube, right? Again, because when you look at any source of light, natural or artificial, they'll make 4 main rays, and if you had a friend sitting at a 90-degree angle from where you're sitting, looking at the same source of light, they'll see the same thing, meaning that you have a primary ray coming at you and a primary ray going away from you. That's 6 main rays. That's the axis of a cube, okay? So hence why the cube in Transformers is called the Allspark, because all sparks have this transcendental axis of a cube around them, right? And that's the same which is in fire. It's the same which is in the sun. And that's where the cube comes from, right? A bushel, right? It's a vessel to hold wheat or grain, typically, but it's like a vessel to carry around stuff. But typically, in antiquity, they used them to carry wheat and grain and stuff. Again, it's so... again, the vessel goes back to our bodies, the temples, right? And the wheat or the grain or the corn is paralleled with the seed, right? So the bushel, right? Or again, the name El goes back to God, which is pure light, right? The fire. And the bush is, well, it's the bush, right? It's the tree is another symbol for the vessel. So the bush El, right? It's the burning bush, right? The bush of El, the burning tree. Okay. So you're not supposed to, hide the light underneath it, right? So in other words, it's like, let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. You don't want to hide the light, right? In other words, you don't want to hide the light behind you, right? Because you are the bushel. Remember, you are the vessel of God. You don't want to hold the light behind you and hide it. You don't want to put it underneath you. Also, the bed is a symbol of the earth, right? Because when you talk about like a riverbed, right? Or like a valley bed or whatever it may be, it's talking about the, the flat part of this whole place that we live in. Again, you don't want to hide the candlestick, the light, or you don't want to hide the candle flame underneath or behind the vessel. In other words, it's like so many people go out into the world, right, as their persona or their character, right? And how many people are willing to, to not be ashamed of speaking the word of Christ or speaking even the name of Christ? You know what I'm saying? And so what they're doing is they're hiding the candle under the bushel or under the bed, right? They're ashamed, mainly because they don't understand the truth. But if they did, then they wouldn't hide the light, right? But to be set on a candlestick, again, the candlestick, it goes back to these things, right? You lay out 7 candlesticks, right? It's the 4th in the center, right? The 7 candlesticks go back to Revelation 1, right? The mystery of the 7 stars, which thou sawest in my right hand, and the 7 golden candlesticks. Again, it's talking about the Axis Mundi, right? Again, another reference to your body. And so you put the candle on the candlestick, right? In other words, you let that light burn up in here, right? Because the candlestick is your spine, right? You keep letting that flame burn up in here, right? you let it shine before men, right? Yeah, and it was another interesting thing about, the burning tree, or uh, the burning bush. The candle stick, a stick again is like a branch of a tree, right? So it's like a burning, piece of wood, right? And it's like you look at the four major suits of the traditional playing cards is hang on one second, let me check something real quick. Oh, snap. Yeah, I'm going to have to hang on one second. Let me pause this and I'll be right back. Okay. Sorry. So the the four main suits of the traditional playing cards are the spades, diamonds, hearts, and clubs, correct? And the four suits of the minor arcana of the tarot are the pentacles, the swords, the cups, and the wands. Now, the clubs and the wands both are representative of fire, okay? The pentacles and the spades are earth. The swords and the diamonds are air. Cups and the hearts are water, and the wands and the clubs represent fire. Okay, so a club originally was like a wooden cudgel, right? It was like a wooden stick, like a big heavy piece of wood, like a branch ripped off of a tree, right? And that was how you made a torch, right? Nowadays, when people think of a torch, right, they think of like a lighter, right, which has no wooden parts to it at all, for the most part. I'm pretty sure there's some people out there with wooden lighters, but the torch nowadays is just referring to the flame itself, whereas the torch back then was not only the flame, but it was also the stick part that made up the torch, right? And the wand, most classically, the wand was like a wooden stick, right? And you ever notice that motif of whenever, people are casting spells, they shoot like fireballs, right? So again, both of these symbols of the wand and the club go back to the burning branches or the burning tree, right? The burning bush, right? So I thought that was pretty interesting. It's like, you look at the suit of the club, right? Hang on, let me pull up a club here real quick. Yeah, 5 of clubs. It looks like a leaf, you see? Or like a 3-leaf clover, right? It's the clubs. And again, wand, right? A wand is not only talking about that stick, right? But it goes back to the word wander, right? Wander. And the wander is going back to the wandering stars, right? And when you understand how the greatest forces of God are invisible, you'll understand that the axis mundi, or the world tree, is going up from the center of the earth to the center of the cosmos, Polaris at the top, and all the stars are on the tips of the branches, the little twigs, and it's spinning around, right? So again, the branches and the twigs of the world tree are ending where the stars are, right? And at least five of them, I don't know, I've never seen Uranus, Neptune, or Pluto, because I've never had a telescope, but I can at least attest to 5 of them, right? Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, right? They are the wanderers. Again, wand, going back to the branches of the tree. And all the stars are being at the tips of it's the fire on the tree that's burning, right? There's a lot of interesting stuff that goes into the weirwood trees and the Song of Ice and Fire with the whole burning tree symbolism, bloody fingers reaching up to the heavens and stuff like that. The bloody fingers being the red leaves, and that goes back to the ash tree and stuff, because the leaves of the ash tree will turn red. Actually, lots of various different trees will turn orange, and red and yellow in autumn. And that's this, again, that's another symbol of the burning tree, right? The fiery tree. And, that symbolically is paralleled with those months that go on during this lower part of the fall, or the autumn and the winter, which is the sun, this light going away and dying out, right? It's becoming embers, hence September, November, December, right? Because it's talking about the fire dwindling down into embers. And when when the light is dying down into little embers, it's in piles of ash. Okay? So all of this, again, is talking about the candle. That tells us about the ictus fish, the candle flame. That tells us about the ictus fish, the square root of 3, the Trinity, the cube with the allspark, right? The bushel, the bed, the candlestick. Like, the things that they're conveying in just a few amount of words is so deep and so universalizing. It's beyond genius. That is why the Bible is truly the inspired word of God. Okay, do you understand? This is how we know. This is how it has its power, is through these symbolic meanings that are acting as signs to point you to these greater truths. Again, there is no power in the word. Well, there is the word, and then there's the thing that the word is pointing to. And the thing that the word is pointing to is ultimately the point. Okay? I've already been recording for about an hour now. I'm probably going to go on for a little bit longer and then be done. I know I only got through a few verses, but again, like I said, I just want to, just talk with no pressure, go into as much of this as I can, just so we can understand just one singular chapter to the fullest extent. I think that's a great way to get people to understand the importance of everything that the Bible has, right? And we'll never get to the bottom of it. That's okay, because we can at least take one step up the stairway of heaven right now, and that's important. 4:22. For there is nothing hid which shall not be manifested, neither was anything kept secret, but that it should come abroad. Again, listen to the language. So when we understand, like, I don't know the proper lingo for understanding certain things about linguistics, but he's saying, for there is nothing hid, right? For there is nothing hid. So he's affirming something by saying there is, but then he's saying nothing, so that's negating it, right? And then he's saying hid, so secret or not there, right? Non-existent, hidden, right? For there is nothing hid. Again, that is the no thing that is hidden, right? So you can think of it as, if you think of the nothingness as a thing, then he's telling you something affirmative. For there is nothing hid, right? And hid, again, vowels are interchangeable with each other. Thank you, Santos Bonacci. Hid is also telling us about the head. That's where it's hidden, right? In the head. And again, the etymology of head goes back to heaven. That's like a long chain link of words, and I never wrote them down, but you can look this up yourself. One of these days I'll have the whole chain out, and you can see how the word head and the word heaven are actually, interlinked. But there is nothing hid, right? Again, it's talking about the dialectrical center of the whole field. For there is nothing hid, right? Again, which shall not be manifested, right? the dielectric will never technically manifest itself, right? But yet, it is a source for all creation. In other words, God's true essence, right, will never completely manifest out here. But everything in creation is a part of him, right? So in other words, it's like saying everything is made out of God, but the the full totality of God will never, like, it'll never be manifested, right? Because again, manifest, it goes back to things that are being created, right? Because fest goes back to like festival, and mani, mani ultimately has lots of meanings. Mani, many, but it goes back to the one, manifest, right? And yeah, so for there is nothing hid which shall not be manifested. But you can also think of it as the more surface meaning, and that is saying that when people lie, it's not going to, because again, when we're talking about for there is nothing hid, we're talking about an affirmative statement about this thing in the center. But it's also like a negative statement about things that are, things out here in this world, right? So it's like, yeah, lies and deceits and secrets, they'll never, of people in our lives and stuff, won't remain secret forever. I mean, just look at history, right? History is like this, up and down again, about things remaining secret for a long time, and then it ultimately gets revealed and everybody knows it, right? So it's like you want to take care of those things, like the things that you wish were not a part of you, or the things that you wish like people never know, or just whatever. It's like you have to live in a way of like just being transparent, right? Like if you feel like you would be embarrassed if certain people found out things about yourself, well, you got to work on yourself to get to a point where it wouldn't bother you, because you've let it go and you've worked on yourself and you've improved yourself, right? So no lie will be concealed forever. Okay, so just keep that in mind, right? And also the truth will be revealed, right? So if you're feeling a little curious and cautious about looking into these things, well, just know that it's like, even if you just can catch a glimpse of the truth, just know that you can maybe you won't get to the bottom of it, but you can receive more of it and more of it, more of it, to where you can understand your creator a lot more clearly. So work towards it, right? Because more and more truth will be revealed to you, right? That's the whole process of the sowing of the seeds, growing the garden, receiving the fruit, getting the new seed, and so on and so forth, right? It's like that, they were saying, Paul, I think, was saying in Colossians or something like that, where it was saying, the truth that has been hid for ages, but is now made manifest to his saints, which is Christ in you, the hope of glory. In other words, this truth, for the most part, has remained hidden from the majority of people. And if you look at history, it's like few saints here and there pop up, and they carried the truth. But for the most part, the masses, and in a collective sort of way, never, like, there's been little breakaway societies, little pockets of culture and stuff, where they get together and like they all fully are aware of this. They all fully realize that they're one, and they all ultimately work together to build something that will ultimately stand the test of time to keep the truth alive, right? But for the most part, you look at society and it's like, yeah, a lot of people aren't hip to these kinds of, these thoughts and these truths and stuff like that. But just understand that that's a part of it, right? And what Jesus is telling you here is that the truth will be revealed. So don't be ashamed of Christ. Stand firm in that persecution, in that suffering because you will be redeemed. You will be redeemed. And it is through faith and logic, the Logos, the word, the divine word of God, which helps you to just not be pulled out of that by people in life, because they will try to pull you out of that truth, right? They will try to make you stumble and fall. Just be aware of that, right? And if you hold your ground and you never let him go, right, you'll be redeemed every single time. I promise you. You don't even need me to promise you, but yeah. But yeah, the word manifest, fest goes back to celebration. It goes back to festival, right? And man, goes back to the one. So the manifest, right, is the celebration of the one, right? So even creation, as seemingly opposite and dualistic it can appear, is ultimately all about a celebration of the one, right? And, that gets into a lot of like deeply metaphysical debates that stem back into the Old Testament and stuff, but I'm not going to get into that. But creation is ultimately about a celebration. It's God's creation, right? So remember that when you're feeling down, okay? But if you never felt down, you wouldn't know what it means to feel up. Yeah, abroad, right? But that it, what does he say? But that it should come abroad, right? It'll come abroad. In other words, it'll go outwards from the center, right? Again, because that's where it's all coming from, is the center, the dielectric. That's where the magnetic field is sprouting out of. It's like the tree sprouts out of the seed, right? It's just interesting how the external part of the field, right, the magnetic field, which is why Mary Magdalene, right, right, the external part of it is the feminine, hence why vessels are named female names, right? So you name a ship a female's name, because again, it's talking about the vessel. And there's a lot of interesting stuff about like Freemasonry and shipbuilding and building temples and churches and cathedrals and stuff like that. That's really fascinating. I'll have to talk more about that at some other point. But yeah, so abroad, again, right? That it should come abroad. Again, come goes back to the compass, right? Again, stemming out from the center and going out to all the various, four corners of the earth, right? But it's interesting too, because when you think about the external field, right, it's a circle, right? But the circle, going back to this thing, is also the center, right? So when you look at the word abroad, remember, abroad means to go outwards, externally from the center, right? Or from one place outwards, right? But the letter A, or the alpha privative, is used to negate the meaning of the following words. So broad, right, means, wide, etc. So when you put a broad, right, it's interesting how the word abroad, similarly means of broad, but it also, the A is telling us that it's like anti or opposite of, right? So again, come goes back to the circle, right? Come, pass, right? And it came to pass, etc. But the center of it is also a circle, right? And this goes back to the monad or the monos, right? So again, you can think of it as abroad, right? Going out from the center. But if you think of the A as the alpha privative, which, it's like when you think of like the word, a theist is someone who believes in God or a higher power. And an atheist is someone who doesn't. Sexual means that you feel sexual. And then asexual, it means that you don't feel sexual. So abroad is not only telling you about this, but it's also telling you about the opposite of that. that it should come abroad. Again, because it's coming from this point out here, right? But it's also coming from out here back into here. And that's the flux of the whole process of electricity, right? Stems out from the center, expands outwards all the way to the very extreme, and then it discharges and then comes right back into the center and charges back up, charges up the field, discharges from the field, goes back into the center, etc. It's like breathing, right? All energy fluctuation is like breathing, right? Because again, respiratory, right? The respiratory sequence is the exchange that we make with the trees, right? It's two fields interacting with each other, which, is like talking about somewhat at the beginning of this chapter. I can't remember what it was, but it's okay. Parables, right? It's two toruses interacting with each other, right? Because they're ultimately paralleled with each other, right? Because everything is one, right? So when you think about the whole year, that's paralleled with the day, and so on and so forth. And that's paralleled with us. It's paralleled with the day of our lives, a year of our lives, our whole lives, and then the whole great cycle, right? But yeah, I just, I thought that was pretty interesting that it should come, the circle, going back to the center and the outside, abroad, right? So, that was the other thing I was going to say. The external part is considered the feminine, right? The magnetism, the Magdala, right? Broad also means woman. So, yeah, there's another thing. 4:23. If any man have ears to hear, let him hear. And we already kind of went over that, right? If any man have ears to hear, let him hear, right? Again, the ear or the hear goes back to the heart, right? Because in the middle of the word heart, you get the ear. Here is the beginning of the word heart, and that's the earth where the seed gets planted into, and earth is an anagram of heart, etc., etc. It's the center which receives the word, right? But it is also the place that sieves it, right? Filtering the word, right? There's multiple different ways that you can receive the word of God, okay? You can receive the word of God from outside of you, and you can receive it from the depths of your being, and it can float up from the very center of you. But then that gets into a lot of wireless metaphysical stuff, and I am nowhere near understanding the full thing of that. But some of the aspects of this teaching are so deep and profound that it's like, I cannot wait to understand that more, because that has the potential to do great change in this world. How long have I... Okay, it's been about an hour and 15. I think this is a good place to stop. It seems like Jesus is sealing off a certain teaching here with 4:23. If any man have ears to hear, let him hear. Because 4:24 goes into... it's connected, but it's just a different set of interesting, comparisons, parables, that interlinks like the next... let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah, it's like the next 9 verses are all related. But I will point this out. So, I'll talk about it just a little bit, and I'll, talk about it again, probably in hopefully more detail later on rather than more detail now. But I never know where my brain's at. The next 9 verses are of a whole set as well. And he speaks, with the red letters up to 4:32. right? And that's very important, 432. And then at 432, it stops his monologue and it goes into narration again. So it's the writer talking about Jesus, right? And that's at 433. So his speech continues on to 432, and then at 433 it shifts, right? And then basically what they're telling us here is about the 32 vertebrae of the spine, right? Once you get to that very top vertebrae and you transcend that, then you enter the 33rd step, which is the skull chamber. Okay, and the skull chamber is that 33rd section, right? It's the very tippity top of the staircase, right? It's the room at the top step, the 32nd step, right? And once you're in there, that's the sacred space, right? The 33rd. And I just want to point this out, because 432 is telling us about the two cubes of the Kabbalah, right? And the 32 and the 33 are telling us about that ascension, right? And Mark 4 is the 32nd chapter in the whole entirety of the New Testament. And, like I've mentioned before, there are 260 chapters in the New Testament, which is in perfect alignment with the 260 kin of the Maya Tzolk'in, right? And they're giving us this distinction of 32 and 33 with Jesus's monologue ending at 32, and then at 33 the narration begins. So there's like this cutoff point. There's this break in the chapter, which is changing the literary mode in that sense, from Jesus's direct words to then the narrator or the writer speaking about the whole situation. This is the 32nd chapter. So, here, let me erase all of this. Except for this part down here, I kind of want to talk about this a little bit. It's a little bit off topic, but it ultimately all comes back in. The name of Jesus Christ in septenary gematria, Jesus equals 27, Christ equals 32, right? So the name Jesus is 27 and the name Christ is 32, giving us a total of 59, which is the number of beads on a rosary. And that goes back to the sexagesimal system, which is time that's embedded all over our human body. It's embedded in the sun and the cosmology and all kinds. It's all over the place in creation. And that's what the 432 goes back to as well, So this is, so out of all 260 chapters, the 32nd chapter is Mark 4, and the 27th is Matthew 27. Now, what's interesting about Matthew 27, okay, so yeah, as I was pointing out, in Mark 4, chapter 32, it's telling, it's Jesus is speaking all the way up to verse 32, and then it stops, and then 33 it changes the literary device to narration, right? So now it's like an overwatcher now speaking, right? And that's a reference to the skull, right? And the language of the verse is also telling us about this process as well. But I'll get into that later on when I go. But the thing I wanted to point out here, and like I said, I'll go into more depth. So again, the 32nd chapter, Mark 4, pointing symbolically and embedding and encoding various different, language and numbering of the verses and stuff, telling us about the steps up the stairway to heaven, which is your spine, right? Getting into that high room, which is the high ram of beef, the Aries, right? Rising up to get to that 33rd chamber, the skull, right? So that's the 32nd chapter, is Mark 4, the one that I've been talking about. But let's go back to Matthew 27 for the name of Jesus, right? Matthew 27, 32 and 33. Matthew 27, 32 and 33. And as they came out, they found a man of Cyrene, Simon by name. Him they compelled to bear his cross. Okay? So, again, Simon of Cyrene has the same name as Simon Peter. And the name of Simon Peter is telling us about the head. Okay? He's telling us about the head, right? It's talking about Aries, that sign of the zodiac that rules the head, the Simon, right? The one Psi, right? And then in 33 it says, and when they were come unto a place called Golgotha, that is to say, a place of a skull. So I just wanted to bring this up because Matthew 27 and Mark 4 are giving us the numerical values of both Jesus and Christ with their chapter numbers, right? And both of them are paralleling the system or this process of rising up the spine back to the high place. It's a whole thing to do with the transcendence, processing of the seeds, the chrism, the oil, etc. But I just kind of wanted to point that out because it's like super cool how they did that. And there's a lot more there, and they compelled him to bear his cross. Again, the cross going back to, the vessel, the spine, right? The tree, to bear his cross. And what is the bear? The bear is Ursa Minor, which is the little bear, whose tail end is Polaris, the North Star, which everything revolves around. So it's the central high star, right? The Polaris, right? Which is the pole of Eris. Yeah. Again, before I go, I just want to point this out. The harvest is plenteous, but the laborers are few. Help me figure this stuff out, because all of this stuff is interconnected, and it's explaining to us how we can fix all these problems in the world. And it begins with us. It begins with us. We have to fix our own selves. And right now, there are plenty of us out there right now that have been striving for this truth, to get this stuff out to people, and we need help. I'm asking, I'm begging, please help us, because the sooner we get this stuff worked out, the sooner that we figure this stuff out, the better. The better it'll be for all of us. And then, not only will you be able to better enjoy your own life, you won't also feel all the baggage of the guilt of all those people who have been suffering because we weren't able to do anything about it. So, and we'll also be able to get rid of all the evil people. Hey, which will be great. But yeah, so I think that's it. There was something else. Oh yeah, I was going to point this out as well. This is just something that's like, really cool. It's like a different way to view the year because, and I'm pretty sure Santos Bonacci has talked about this before. I don't remember, because he's got a lot of content. I don't remember seeing any video about this, but I just kind of wanted to point this out. So, the sine wave is like the map of the year, right? You can think of, if you were to cut these two halves of the pie into sections of 12, you would get, the 12 30-day sequences of the zodiac, the process of the sun rising and then, then falling, etc., the whole year. But if you also break it up into 8 sections, you also get the Celtic holidays, which is super cool, right? So, and technically the sections of these are in the center of each slice of the pie, right? Rather than like the intersecting points. But so the first one would be March 21st, which is Ostara, right? That's basically the beginning of spring. And then you have the 45 days later, which is the point in between the spring equinox and the summer solstice, which is Beltane on May 1st. And then, and if I'm not mistaken, it's like also called May Day. I'm not entirely sure. There's a lot in here with the Celtic holidays, especially stuff that I wish I knew more about. But then you get to the summer solstice, right, which is Litha, right? 45 days later, you get to June 21st. Oh, I guess that's that high point there. I don't know. Again, I got to look into this more. But then you get to the third section, which is the summer, right? Or it's the beginning of the summer. And that's Litha, yeah. And then you go to the fourth part of it, which is Lunasa on August 1st. And then, so that's the four that, you got 2 for spring, 2 for summer, and then it dips down into here when you enter the autumn, right? And then on September 21st, my birthday, it begins Mabon, right, which begins the autumn. And then 45 days later from that, you get to Samhain, which is Halloween, November 1st, around there. And then 12/21 begins the holiday of Yule, which is what we know as Christmas, right? And then on February 1st, around February 1st, it's Imbolc, right? So the year can also be seen as these 8 different points. So it's like when you think of like the 8-spoke wheel, right? Right, the helm in that sense. That's what it's telling us about. Again, because, all holidays, as corrupted and perverted as they have become, although people aren't freaking out as much on Black Friday and like trampling and killing, employees at various different stores and stuff like that, but that may be because they're doing more online shopping, but I don't know. I think people are getting better. But what was my point? Yeah, holidays, right? Holidays are ultimately holy days, and they're holy because they're specific points in the year that are changing, right? The seasonal changes in that sense. And these 8 major points are mapped on this 8-spoked wheel, right? And the point that I want to make here is this. So as the different archetypal points along the yearly cycle, they're also being paralleled with the daily cycle as well. And then those are occurring in our body. You ever notice how like you can feel a lot of energy in a certain part of your body for a certain amount of time, and then it'll like shift and then go into like another part of your body, right? Like one day you can feel weak in your knees, but your stomach can feel strong. And then another day you feel weak in your heart, but your head can feel strong. You ever notice that? Like there's like this plus and minus moving around in your body, right? That's what the whole process of Kabbalah is talking about. That's what we're ultimately trying to get to the bottom of and understand, right? And all of this is interconnected. So, the cycle of the sun through the seasons, the 12 disciples in that sense, 12 zodiac signs, the 12 sephira, the fruit on the Kabbalah tree, right? The different axial points on the hypercube, the various different breath codes, right? And then there's all of, the symbols and all the various other things throughout the world and life and our existence and God's creation that are all paralleling these things. Certain types of crystals, certain types of herbs, certain types of colors, certain types of musical notes, and so on and so forth, that are all different archetypal points of this one universalized system. And if we can understand the functions of these things, which we already do to a certain extent, like basically there will be plenty enough for everybody. People won't get sick anymore. We won't have need for money. Everybody will have a place in this world, right? Everybody will belong. People's problems will be a thing of the past. And it'll be good like that for a while. I'm not going to say it's going to be like that forever, but it'll be good for a long time, right? But that's where we're headed, right? So I just wanted to point that out because that's what I'm striving for. And I guess I had to wait till I got to a high point when my spirit became quickened, which, quickness is the symbol of the fire in the center, whereas, you know, slowness is talking about the ice, right? And this is all about the Song of Ice and Fire. But yeah, I guess I'll go for now because it's been an hour and a half. Yeah, I know I only got through 10 verses, but hopefully you're understanding the format of what these videos are going to be like. And I'm going to keep going until I cover everything that I need to on this particular chapter. And then I'll probably do the same type of format later on for another chapter. Not sure yet, but right now that's what I feel like, you know, that I should do. But anyways, I hope that I'm being of some use to somebody. But, you know, do what I can, you know. Y'all have a nice night. Oh, there's my alarm. But yeah, y'all have a nice night. Peace, love, flower power, and all that. Flower power and Powerpuff Girls, right?